There we go. So I want to share a little bit and then we'll have a practice time together. I was thinking recently about my middle school shop teacher back in the early 70s, Mr. Breston. He used to have a sign in his classroom with the words, "Stop, look, and listen." He also had this large red stop button on the side of his desk. And when things got a little too frenetic in the classroom and fingers were getting just a little too close to table saw blades, and he would just hit the button, which would cut power to all the tools. And he'd proclaim in this very loud, calm, but firm voice, "Stop, look, and listen." And then he'd wait until the classroom would just settle in, quiet down, and get still. Uh, so inviting and even urging people to stop, look, and listen was not just good advice, I don't think, in a classroom full of crazy 11 and 12-year-old boys who are handling power tools and hammers. But it's a good reminder, I think, for all of us about how we might live our own lives as we seek to cultivate this present moment awareness through paying attention on purpose. And Mr. Breston's straightforward phrase is a good shorthand for mindfulness practice, when we stop and we, in a sense, look and listen, pause and let go of the habit of kind of running all the time. Pause to take a breath, to pay attention, to recenter, to stop and notice, becoming aware through the senses by looking and listening and the other senses as well, so that we might be more fully present and less reactive, and in that sense, more skillful in the way we live our lives. It's easy, though, to get caught up in thoughts and worries and emotions and distractions. But instead of simply reacting to the ups and downs, when we focus attention calmly, you can become more conscious of what you're seeing and experiencing too. And in doing so, you can live life in a more kind of informed way rather than someone who's just running from one thing to the next and putting out fires. And sometimes that needs to happen, but that can also become a whole way of life. Many stimuli trigger reactions in us, and we run from one thing to the next just based on that stimulus. So, another way to understand the value of stop, look, and listen is to consider making more space in your life. There's a quote that's often attributed to the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. He wrote that book, Man's Search for Meaning, a long time ago now, but the phrase was, I think, popularized by the author Stephen Covey, too. But it says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And he goes on, in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response and in our choosing lies our growth and our freedom. Makes sense, but we don't always remember that there's always a space, even if the response is more of a knee-jerk reaction and that space is very compressed. Still, it's there, the space between stimulus and response. And I think in the mindfulness world, that refers to our pausing in a non-reactive way and just opening up the space so that we are able to be free, regulate our own emotional responses, and in that sense, grow. And that's all cultivated through mindfulness practice. As events occur internally or externally, mindfulness helps us to see options for choosing our reaction and not just reacting right away. So as we continue developing our practice, we can become more informed and more insightful, which the tradition, the meditative traditions, all of them call that some form of wisdom. And we can learn to reside more often. And when we get caught up in reactivity, we can simply notice it, return to that place of calm knowing. And over time, with practice, it becomes easier to find our way back, even when we do kind of get reactive. We can reset more easily. So, living mindfully requires us to pay attention intentionally and in this present moment. And this can be hard work, and it demands a kind of discipline too, and a commitment and a consistency to cultivate that presence. So if you haven't done so already, maybe it's time to set up an intention to practice more consistently, daily even. So here I'm referring to the formal practice, not rigid, but formal, as in intentionally choosing to practice for a designated period of time and then developing this consistent pattern over time. So in doing so, concentrate on consistency, and if necessary, give yourself some leeway, regarding the length of your mindfulness practice time, whether it's sitting meditation, walking meditation, body scan, mindful stretching. And more current research on the benefits of practicing mindfulness and on the changes that happen. A lot of them are pointing to the importance of repetition. If you don't have 20 or 30 minutes twice a day, every day, then practice for 10 or 15 minutes. Even 5 minutes is better than nothing, but do it every day, or at least most days anyway. More extended practice periods are also helpful for cultivating and deepening your practice. So you might consider, weekend retreats or longer ones, 5 or 8 day retreats. But don't defer your regular ongoing practice until you have time to do some more intensive, longer practice time like a retreat. The saying I like to use to remind us is a little, a lot is better than a lot, a little. A little, a lot is better than a lot, a little. If you go on one retreat a year for 30 days and then you don't do anything else, we generally don't see as much of benefit there than if you have a consistent practice. So let's do that. Let's practice together. We'll do a simple sitting in the present moment with awareness. And so that's not just a mental practice, it's a physical thing too. So right away we start with attending to the physical posture, the body itself, sitting in a relatively upright and grounded position on your chair or on a cushion on the floor. You can do this standing as well and still have that sense of groundedness and being upright. And let your hands just come to rest, maybe palms facing down or facing up, or resting on the thighs, or one hand on top of the other in the lap. And you can close your eyes. You don't need to close your eyes. You can just lower the gaze, softening the gaze. And then lengthening up through the spine so that there's a kind of a rising up, leveling the head. So the body is relatively relaxed and in alignment, but is also aware and awake. And then bringing the attention to the breath as a present moment object of awareness. And just noticing the sensations of air flowing in and out of the body. You can even locate that physically in the body, the rising and falling of the belly or the chest. We're not thinking about the breath. We're not manipulating the breath. It's just simple awareness, breathing in and breathing out. Let this be an anchor, a home base for present moment awareness. So when the mind wanders, which it will, just return it to the breath without fuss, without judgment, criticism, struggle. And let your attitude be open and generous and curious and understanding or forgiving when you do get caught up in thought or emotion or sensations. You just acknowledge that, the mind wandering off, and then simply come back. Or be curious about a sensation without having to analyze it or explore it. Do your best to just pay attention in real time to this moment, which is not stationary, it's moment by moment by moment. So when we say be in the present moment, that's a moment that's also moving. But that's a great opportunity for us to recommit moment by moment by moment to being present. Another kind of repetition inside the practice of recommitting to this moment and this moment and this moment. You won't do that all the time. Your mind will wander off. You'll get caught up in a thought stream or intense emotion, physical sensation. So we don't have to put up walls and stop that and wall it off. And just notice when you're caught in it. And then just doing your best to just release whatever has caught you, whatever hook you've bit down on, and just come back to a moment by moment awareness, allowing the breath to be that anchor, that compass. Here's a poem entitled Walk Slowly by Dannenfelser. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still. And just like that, something in me settles, softens, makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper, and I remember again that life isn't a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we were born for. As many times as I forgot or I forget, I catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going. That many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe and be, and walk slowly into the mystery. So transitioning from this relative stillness, and we have a few moments for questions or comments. Let me stop the recording.